starting my part 2 right now of the new diet via vegetarianism. I'm going to set a couple things up. Get my door shut. Get everybody out of the way. All right, part 2. Now, okay, last time I left off on that one article, or not, it's not an article, it's like an essay by C.W. Leadbeater. I'm going to try and get it back open. Got it on my phone. Got to have all the technology bullshit ready for this. I'm not a big fan of, as you can tell, I'm not a big fan of, it. Okay, I left off right here on less animal passion. Okay. Because the eating of dead bodies leads to indulgence in drink and increases animal passions in man, Mr. H.B. Fowler, who has studied and lectured on dysphomania for 40 years, declares that the use of flesh foods, by the excitation that it exercises on the nervous system, prepares the way for habits of intemperance in everything, and the more flesh is consumed, the more serious is the danger of confirmation or confirmed alcoholism. Many experienced physicians have made similar experience and wisely act on them in their treatment for dysphomaniacs. Oh, sorry, I keep saying that word wrong. Dipsomaniacs, sorry. Hispanics? Jeez, as you can tell, I'm not, when it comes to old, turn of the century English, I'm not very inclined. The lower part of man's nature is undoubtedly intensified by the habit of feeding upon corpses. Even after eating a full meal of such horrible material, man still feels unsatisfied, for he is still conscious of vague, uncomfortable sense of want, and consequently he suffers greatly from nervous strain. This craving is the hunger of the bodily tissues, which cannot be renewed by the poor stuff offered to them as food. To satisfy this vague craving, or rather to appease these restless nerves so that it will no longer be felt, recourse often had stimulants. Sometimes alcoholic beverages are taken. Sometimes an attempt is made to allay these feelings with black coffee, and other times strong tobacco is even used to endeavor to soothe the irritated, exhausted nerves. Here we have the beginning of intemperance, for in the majority of cases, intemperance began in the attempt to ally with alcoholic stimulants. The vague, uncomfortable sense of want which follows the eating of impoverished food that does not feed. There is no doubt that drunkenness and all of the poverty, wretchedness, disease, and crime associated with it may frequently be traced to errors of feeding. We may follow out this line of thought indefinitely. We might speak of the irritability occasionally culminating in this insanity, which is now acknowledged by all authorities to be a frequent result of erroneous feeding. We might mention 100 familiar symptoms of indigestion and explain that indigestion is always the result of incorrect feeding. Surely, however, enough has been said to indicate the importance and far-reaching influence of a pure diet upon the welfare of the individual and of the race. Mr. Barnwell Booth, the chief of the Salvation Army, has issued a pronunciamiento. I don't know why. Something like in Spanish almost? I don't know. I don't know what's up with that. It's all good though. Upon the subject of vegetarianism, which he speaks strongly and decidedly in its favor, giving a list of no less than 19 good reasons why men should abstain from the eating of flesh. He insists that a vegetarian diet is necessary to purity, to chastity, and to the perfected control of the appetites, passions, which are so often the source of great temptation. He remarked that the growth of meat eating among the people is one of the causes of the increase of drunkenness, and that it also favors indolence, sleepiness, want of energy, indigestion, constipation, and other like miseries and degradation. Got it out. He also states that eczema, piles, I don't even know what that is. They're like some old disease. Worms and dysentery and severe headaches are frequently brought on by flesh diet. And then he believes the great increase in consumption and cancer during the last 100 years to have been caused by the corresponding increase in the use of animal food. I wouldn't be surprised. Economy. Because the vegetable diet is in every way cheaper as well as better than flesh, which this is a huge misunderstanding thanks to you know, those fuckers that run those PCCs and Whole Foods that overprice the living shit out of everything. In the encyclical just mentioned, Mr. Booth gives us one of his reasons for advocating it, that a vegetarian diet of wheat, oats, corn, and other grains, lentils, peas, beans, nuts, and similar food is more than 10 times as economical as a flesh diet. Meat contains half its weight in water, which has to be paid for as though it were meat. A vegetable diet, even though it were, if we allow cheese, butter, and milk, will cost only a quarter as much as a mixed diet of fresh flesh and vegetables. Tens of thousands of poor people who have now the greatest difficulty to make ends meet after buying flesh food would, by the substitution of fruit and vegetables and other economical foods, be able to get along in comfort. There's also an economical side of this question, which must not be ignored. Note how many more men could be supported by a certain number of acres of land which were devoted to the growing of wheat, than by the same amount of land which was laid out in pasture. Think, too, for how many more men healthy work upon the land would be found in the former case than in the latter. And I think you will begin to see that there is a great deal to be said from the point of view also. Leadbeater here was a great big thinker here. The sin of slaughter. Hitherto we have been speaking of what has been called the physical and selfish considerations which should make a man give up the eating of his dead flesh and turn him, even though only for his own sake, to the pure diet. Let us now think for a few moments of the moral and unselfish considerations connected with this duty towards others. The first of these, and this does not seem to be the most terrible thing, is the awful sin of unnecessarily murdering these animals. Those who live in Chicago know well how this ghastly, ceaseless slaughter goes on in their midst, how they feed the greater part of the world by wholesale butchery, and how the money made in this abominable business is stained with blood, every coin of it. I have shown clearly upon the irreproachable testimony that all this is unnecessary, and if it is unnecessary, it is a crime. The destruction of life is always a crime. There may be certain cases in which it is lesser of two evils, but here it is needless and without shadow of justification, for it happens only because of the selfish, unscrupulous greed of those who coin money out of the agonies of the animal kingdom in order to pander to the perverted taste of those who are sufficiently depraved to desire such loathsome aliment. Remember, it is not only those who do the obscene work, but those who, by feeding on this dead flesh, encourage them and make their own crime maneuver. I don't know that word, okay, so let's just pass it. You guys get the fucking point. Who are guilty before God of this awful thing. Every person who partakes of this unclean food has a share in the indescribable guilt and suffering by which it has been obtained. It is universally recognized in law that whatsoever a man does through another, he does himself. All right, people. That's a good saying right there. A man will often say, but it would make no difference to all this horror if I alone cease to eat meat. That is untrue, and it's just untrue. First, it would make a difference, for although you may consume only a pound or two each day, that in time amount to the weight of an animal. Secondly, it is not a question of amount, but of complicity in a crime. And if you partake in the results of a crime, you're helping to make it remunerative. Once again, my English skills are just amazing. And so you share in the guilt. Okay, no honest man can fail to see what this is so, but when man's lower lusts are concerned, they are usually dishonest in their view, and decline to face the plain facts. There surely can be no difference of opinion as to the proposition of that all is this horrible, unnecessary slaughter is indeed a terrible crime. Another point to be remembered is that there is dreadful cruelty connected with the transport of these miserable animals, both by land and sea, and there is often dreadful cruelty in the slaughtering itself. Those who seek to justify these loathsome crimes will tell you that an endeavor is made to murder the animals as rapidly and painlessly as possible, but you have only to read the report to see that in many cases these intentions are not carried out and appalling suffering ensues. The degradation of the slaughter man is the next section. Yet another point to be considered is the wickedness of the causing degradation and sin in other men. If you are yourselves had to use the knife or the poleaxe and slaughter the animal before you could feed upon its flesh, you would realize that the sickening nature of the task and would soon refuse to perform it, which I would like to give a shout out to that comment because that is highly true. Except for all you hunters out there. Would the delicate ladies who devour beefsteaks like to see their sons working as slaughtermen? If not, then they have no right to put this task upon some other woman's son. We have no right to impose upon a fellow citizen's work which we ourselves should decline to do. It may be said that we force no one to undertake this abominable means of livelihood, but that is a mere, I don't know that word either, fucking 19th century writers. For in eating this horrible food, we are making a demand that someone shall brutalize himself and someone shall degrade himself below the level of humanity. You know that a class of men has been created by the demand for this food, a class of men which has an exceedingly bad reputation. Naturally, those who are brutalized by such unclean work has this prove themselves brutal in their relations as well. They are savage in their disposition and bloodthirsty in their quarrels. And I have heard it stated that in many a murder case, evidence has been found that the criminal employed the peculiar twist of a knife which is characteristic of the slaughterman. You must surely recognize that here is an unspeakably horrible work, that if you take any part of this terrible business, even that of helping to support it, you are putting another man in the position of doing it, not in the least for your need, but merely for the gratification of your lusts and passions. All you big people that gotta feed the lusts and passions out there. Sorry, my nose is a little stuffed up right now. Work that you would under no circumstances consent to do for yourself. Then we should surely remember that we are all of us hoping for this time of universal peace and kindness, a golden age when war shall be no more, a time when man shall be so far removed from strife and anger that the whole conditions of the world would be different from those which now prevail. Do you not think that the animal kingdom also will have its share in the good time coming? That this horrible nightmare of wholesale slaughter will be removed from it? The really civilized nations of the world know far better than this. It is only that we of the West are as yet a young race and still have many of the crudities of youth. Otherwise, we could not bear these things amongst us, even for a day. Beyond all question, the future is with the vegetarian. It seems certain that in the future, and I hope it may be in the near future, we shall be looking back upon this time with disgust and with horror. I would agree. In spite of all its wonderful discoveries, in spite of its marvelous machinery, in spite of the enormous fortunes that have been made in it, I am certain that our descendants will look back upon this age as one of the partial civilization, only of partial civilization, and in fact, but little removed from savagery. One of the arguments by which they will prove this will assuredly be that we allowed among us this wholesale, unnecessary slaughter of innocent animals, that we actually battened on it and made money out of it, and that we even created a class of beings who did this dirty work for us, a rid that we were not ashamed to profit by the results of the degradation. All these are considerations referring only to the physical plane. Now let me tell you something of the occult side of all this. Up to the present, I have made to you many statements, strong and definite, I hope, but every one of them statements which you can prove for yourself. You can read the testimony of well-known doctors and scientific men. You may test for yourselves the economic side of your question. You may go and see, if you will, how all these different types of men contrive to live so well upon vegetarian diet, which I'd be one that you could get an example of. I actually do partake in the vegetarian diet, and I'm doing just fine. And I'm actually aiming for vegan. All that I have said hitherto is thus within your reach. But now I am abandoning the field of ordinary physical reasoning and taking up to a level where we have naturally to take the word of those who explored these higher realms. Let us turn now to the hidden side of all this, the occult. Under this heading also we shall have two sets of reasons, those which refer to ourselves and our own development, and those which refer to the greater scheme of evolution and our duty towards it, so that once more we may classify them as selfish and unselfish. Although at a much higher level than before, I have, I hope, clearly shown in the earlier part of this lecture that there is simply no room for discussion in regard to this question of vegetarianism. The whole of the evidence and of the considerations are entirely on one side, and there is absolutely nothing to be said to the opposition to them. This is even more strikingly the case when we come to consider the occult part of our argument. There are some students hovering around the fringes of occultism who are not yet prepared to follow its dictates to the uttermost, and therefore do not accept its teaching when it interferes with their personal habits and desires. Some such have tried to maintain that the question of food can make little difference from the occult standpoint, but the unanimous verdict of all the great schools of occultism, both ancient and modern, have been definite on this point and have asserted that all true progress, purity, is necessary, even on the physical plane in the matters of diet as well as in the far higher matters. In many books and lectures I have already explained this existence of different planes of nature and the vast unseen worlds all about us, and I have also had the occasion to refer often to the fact that man has within himself matter belonging to all these higher planes, so that he is furnished with a vehicle corresponding to each of them, through which he can receive impressions and by means which he can act. Can these higher bodies of men be in any way affected by the food which enters into the physical body, with which they are also so closely connected? Assuredly they can, and for this reason the physical matter in man is in close touch with the astral and mental matter, so much so that each is so great extent a counterpart of the other. There are many types of degrees of density among astral matter, for example, so that it is impossible for one man to have an astral body built of coarse and gross particles, while another may have one which is more delicate and refined. As the astral body is the vehicle of the emotions, passions, and sensations, it follows that the man whose astral body is of the grosser type will be chiefly amenable to the grosser varieties of passion and emotion, whereas the man who has the finer astral body will find that its particles most readily vibrate in response to higher and more refined emotions and aspirations. The man, therefore, who builds gross and undesirable matter into his physical body is thereby drawing into his astral body matter of a coarse of unpleasant type as its counterpart. We all know that on the physical plane, the effect of our overindulgence in dead flesh is to produce a coarse, gross appearance in the man. That does not mean that it is only the physical body which is in unlovely condition, but it means that also those parts of the man which are invisible to our ordinary sight, the astral and the mental bodies, are not in good condition either. Thus, a man who is building himself a gross and impure physical body is building for himself the same type, coarse, and unclean astral mental bodies as well. That is visible at one to the eye of the developed clairvoyant. The man who learns to see these higher vehicles sees at once the effects on the higher bodies produce the impurity in the lower. He sees at once the difference between the man who feeds his physical vehicle with pure food and then puts it into the loathsome decaying flesh. Let us see how the difference will affect the man's evolution. Impure vehicles. If it is clear that a man's duty with regard to himself is to develop all his different vehicles as far as possible in order to make them instruments for the use of the soul, there is still a higher stage in which that soul itself is being trained to be fit an instrument in the hands of the deity, a perfect channel for this divine grace. But the first step towards this high aim is the soul shall learn thoroughly to control the lower bodies, so that there shall be in them no thought or feeling except those which the soul allows. All these vehicles, therefore, should be in the highest possible condition of efficiency, also be pure and clean from taint, and it is obvious that this can never be so long as the man absorbs into the physical encasement such as undesirable constituents. Even the physical body, its senses, perceptions, can never be at the best unless the food is pure. Anyone who adopts vegetarian diet will speedily begin to notice that the sense of taste and smell is far keener than it was when he fed upon flesh. I'd be another example of how this would be true. I actually did notice that, and my tastes have actually started to become more inclined to, foods like nuts and vegetables. I really do enjoy it a lot more than I did when I was eating meat, let me tell you. Okay, a delicate difference of the flavor in foods, which is the tasteless, such as rice meat. Okay, same thing is true to a still greater extent with regard to the higher bodies. Their senses cannot be clear if impure or coarse matter is drawn into them. Anything of this nature clogs and dulls them so that it becomes more difficult for the soul to use them. This is a fact which has always been recognized by the student of occultism. You will find that all those who in ancient days entered upon the mysteries were men of the utmost purity and coarsely invariably vegetarian. Carnivorous diet is fatal to anything like real development, and those who adopt it are throwing serious and unnecessary difficulties in their own way. I am well aware that there are other and still higher considerations which are of greater weight than anything upon the physical plane, and that the purity of the heart and the soul is more important to the man than that of the body. Yet there is surely no reason why we should not have both. Indeed, the one suggests the other, and the higher should include the lower. There are quite enough difficulties in the way of self-control and self-development. It is surely worse than foolish to go out of your way to add another and a very considerable one of the list. Although it is untrue that a pure heart will do more for us than a pure body, yet the latter can certainly do us a great deal, and we are none of us so far advanced along with the road towards spirituality that we can afford to neglect the great advantage to that it gives us. Anything that makes our path harder than it needs to be is empathetically something to be avoided. In all cases, this flesh food undoubtedly makes the physical body a worse instrument and puts difficulties in the way of the soul by intensifying all the desirable elements and passions belonging to the lower planes. What the hell was that? Oh, sorry, I don't know, I got like a message or some shit. Alright, anyway. Nor is a serious effect during physical life, the only one of which, okay, I said that already. Okay, if through introducing loathsome, okay, I said that already too, the man builds himself a coarse and unclean astral body. We have to remember that it is in the degraded vehicle that we have to spend the first part of our life after death. Because of the gross matter which has been built into it, all sorts of undesirable entities will be drawn into association with him, and will make his vehicles their home and find a ready response within him for the lower passions. It is not only that his animal passions are more easily stirred here on earth, but in addition to this, he will suffer acutely from the working out of these desires from death. Here again, looked at even from the selfish point of view, we can see the occult considerations confirm the straightforward common sense of the arguments on the physical plane. The higher sight, when brought to bear upon this problem, shows us still more vividly how undesirable is the devouring of flesh, since it intensifies within us that from which we most need to be free. And therefore, from this point of view of progress, that habit is the thing to be cast out once and forever. Okay, man's duty towards nature, the next section. Then there is a far more important unselfish side of the question, that of man's duty towards nature. Every religion has taught that man should put himself always on the side of the will of God in the world, and the side of good as against evil, of evolution as against retrogression. The man who ranges himself on the side of evolution realizes the wickedness of destroying life, for he knows that just as he is here in the physical body in order that he may learn the lessons of this plane, so is this animal occupying the body for the same reason, that through it he may gain experience at his lower stage. He knows that the life behind the animal is a divine life, that all in the world is divine. The animals, therefore, are truly our brothers, even though they may be younger brothers, and we have no sort of right to take their lives for the gratification of our perverted taste. No right to cause them to untold agony and suffering, merely to satisfy our degraded and detestable lusts. We have brought things to such a pass with our miscalled sport, our wholesale slaughterings, that all wild creatures fly from the side of us. Does that seem like the universal brotherhood of God's creatures? Is that your idea of the golden age of the worldwide kindliness that is to come, a condition when every living thing flees from the face of man because of his murderous instincts? There is an influence flowing back upon us from all this, an effect which can hardly realize unless you are able to see how it looks when regarded with the sight of the higher plane. Every one of the creatures in this way has its own thoughts and feelings with regard to all this. It has horror, pain, and indignation, and intense but unexpressed feelings of the hideous injustice to it all. The whole atmosphere about us is full of it. Twice lately, I have heard from the psychic people that have left the awful aura of the surroundings of Chicago, even many miles away from it. Mrs. Besant herself told me that the same thing years ago in England, that long before she came to the sight of Chicago, she felt the horror of it and the deadly pale of depression descending upon her and asked, in quotations, "Where are we, and what is this reason that we should be due this terrible feeling in the air?" Quotation. To sense the effect as clearly as this is beyond the reach of the person who has not developed. But though all the inhabitants may not be directly conscious of it and recognize it, Mrs. Besant did, they may be sure that they are suffering from unconsciously, and that the terrible vibration of horror and fear and injustice is acting upon every one of them, even though they may not know it. Ghastly, unseen results. The feelings of nervousness and profound depression, which are so common there, are largely due to the awful influence which spreads over the city like a plague cloud. I do not know how many thousands of creatures are killed every day, but the number is very large. Remember that every one of these creatures is a definite entity, not a permanent reincarnating individuality like yours or mine, but still an entity which has its life upon the astral plane and persists there for a considerable time. Remember that every one of these remains to pour out his feelings and indignation, in order to all these injustice and torment which has been inflicted upon him. Realize for yourself the terrible atmosphere which exists about those slaughterhouses. Remember that a clairvoyant can see the vast hosts of animal souls, and that he knows how strong they are feelings of horror and resentment, and how these recoil to all points upon the human race. They react upon most of all upon those who are least able to resist them, upon the children who are more delicate and sensitive than the hardened adult, not a cold. The city is a terrible place in which to bring up children, a place where the whole atmosphere, both physical and psychic, is charged with fumes of blood, and which all that means. I read an article only the other day in which in which it explained that the nauseating stench which arises from the Chicago slaughterhouses and settles like a fatal, over the city is by no means the most deadly influence that comes up from the Christian hell for animals, though it is the breath of certain death to many a mother's darling. The slaughterhouses make not only a pestle for the bodies of children, but for the soul as well. Not only are the children employed in the most revolting and cruel work, but the whole trend of the thoughts is directed towards killing. Occasionally one is found too sensitive to endure the sights and sounds of that ceaseless, awful battle between man's cruel lust and the inalienable right of every creature to its own life. I read how one boy, for whom a minister had secured a place in the slaughterhouse, returned home day after day, pale and sick and unable to eat or sleep, and finally came to the minister of the gospel for the compassionate Christ, told him that he was willing to starve if necessary, but that he could not wait in the blood another day. The horrors of the slaughter had so affected him that he could no longer sleep. Yet this is many a boy is doing and seeing from day to day, until he becomes hardened to the taking of life, and then someday, instead of cutting the throat of a lamb or a pig, he kills a man. Good point. And straightway we turn our lust for slaughter upon him in turn, and think we have done justice. I read that a young woman who does much philanthropic work in the neighborhood of these pest houses declares that, which I mean, we're assuming here that I guess like they had kids working in these slaughterhouses back in the day. I mean, shit. I mean, wow. I mean, like, you know, what the hell? What the hell was up with everybody back then, man? In these neighborhoods of these pest houses declares that what most impresses her about the children is that they seem to have no games except games of killing. They have no conception of any relation to animals except the relation of the slaughter to the victim. This is the education which so-called Christians are giving to the children of the slaughterhouses. Yeah. A daily education of murder, and then they express a surprise at the number and brutality of the murders in that district. Yet your Christian public goes on serenely saying its prayers and singing its psalms and listening to its sermons, as if no such outrages were being perpetrated against God's children in that sinkhole of pestilence and crime. It's a 1900s way of saying shithole, everybody. Surely the habit of eating dead flesh has produced a moral apathy among us. Are we doing well? Do you think in rearing your future citizens among surroundings of such utter brutality as this? Even on the physical plane, this is a terribly serious matter, and from the occult point of view, it is unfortunately far more serious still. For the occultist sees the psychic results of all this, see how these forces are acting upon the people, and how they intensify brutality and some other word I don't know. Okay, he sees what a center of vice and of crime you have created, and how from it the infection is gradually spreading until it affects the whole country, and even the whole of what is called civilized humanity. The world is being affected by it in many ways, which most people do not in the least realize. There are the constant feelings of causeless terror in the air. Many of our children are unnecessarily and inexplicably afraid. They feel terror that they know not what. Terror of the dark, or when they are alone for a few moments. Strong forces are playing about us for which we cannot account, and you do not realize that this all comes from the fact that the whole atmosphere is changed by the hostility of these murdered creatures. The stages of evolution are closely interrelated, and you cannot do wholesale murder in this way upon your younger brothers without the feeling the effect terribly among your own innocent children. Surely a better time shall come when we shall be free from this horrible blot upon our civilization, this awful reproach upon our compassion and our sympathy, and when that comes, we shall find presently that there will be a vast improvement in these matters, and by degrees we shall all rise to a higher level and be freed from all these instinctive terrors and hatreds. The better time to come. We might all be freed from this very soon if men and women should only think that the average man is not only a brute, but means to be kind if you only knew how. He does not think he goes on from day to day and does not realize that he is taking part all the time in an awful crime. But facts are facts, and there is no escape from them. Everyone who is partaking in this abomination is helping to make this appalling thing a possibility, and undoubtedly shares the responsibility for it. You know that this is so, and you can see what a terrible thing it is. But you will say, quotation, how can we do to improve matters when we who are only tiny units in this mighty, seemingly vast of humanity? It is only by, quotations, it is only by units rising above the rest and becoming more civilized, and we shall finally arrive at our higher civilization of the race as a whole. There is a golden age to come, not only for man, but for the lower kingdoms, a time when humanity will realize its duty to its younger brothers, not to destroy them, but to help them and train them so that they may receive from them not terror and hatred, but love and devotion and friendship and reasonable cooperation. And time will come when all the forces of nature shall be intelligently working together towards the final end, not with constant suspicion and hostility, but with universal recognition of that brotherhood which is ours because we are all children of the same Almighty Father. Let us at least, despite your, whatever, you can look at that however you'd like to, let us at least make the experiment. Let us free ourselves from the complicity of these awful crimes. Let us set ourselves to try, each in our own small circle, to bring near the bright time of peace and love, which is the dream, and the earnest desire for every true-hearted thinking man. At least we ought to surely to be willing to do so in a small thing as to help the world onward towards the glorious future. We ought to make ourselves pure and our thoughts and actions as well as our food, so that by example as well as by the precept we may be doing all that in us lies to spread the gospel of love and compassion, and put an end to the reign of brutality and terror, and bring near the dawn of the great kingdom of the righteousness and love, when the will of our Father shall be done upon earth as it is in heaven. Or as above, so below. Okay, now that's the end of it. And I had a first video where I started the first half, whatever, it was a little more than half, and that was C.W. Leadbeaders, Vegetarianism and Occultism. It's a must-read for understanding these things. And going off the last things he said, I think I'm going to go on a little bit of a tangent here about the conspiracy side to it. So, I mean, if someone knew this and wanted to keep the population in some sort of degraded state, as he was stating, you could totally do it. Just keep feeding them meat. I totally agree that if we are causing suffering to animals, then you're causing suffering to all. I mean, you need to look at things in a more unified way. If you're not, you're stuck in your ego solipsistic possible idea of looking at things. Now, getting on to the conspiracy side, I mean, there's also Oh, I mean, come on. You know, I mean, the crap they put in the food. I mean, come on. The fact that we feed corn to cattle, I mean, that's ridiculous. They need to be grass-fed. These, this isn't even conspiracy. Just the torture we put them through. I mean, that man that wrote that probably didn't even live in a time when we had done such, like, talk about, you know, evil crimes as we do now to cattle. You know, sticking them knee deep in their own fucking shit on a farm. And then, you know, we're pretty much saying that we own your life, okay? Now, it's one thing to go out and kill an animal and eat it, which I would still not suggest. I think it's still kind of out, you know, it's still kind of, you know, whatever. I mean, I can't make anybody do anything, but I'm just saying that, hey, look, why are we doing that? I don't know. But, hey, let's say on a different tangent, if we're talking about what we do to these animals and how we torture them, I mean, it's absolutely asinine. Okay, I mean, like, you should see these farms. If you don't believe me, turn on Earthlings. Turn on that fucking movie. Get Cowspiracy. Get some of these GMO movies. What you could? What was that one that was? It was really famous for a long time. Food Inc. That was another one. Get these movies on. Just watch them for a little bit. I want to see what people, you know, just see how we decide that we can pretty much torture these animals and tell them who, you know, oh look, your life is mine. Your life is mine is what we're saying. So you're going to be here, you know, not moving, eating corn, which you don't even, I mean, it's like, you know, it's just so dumb. And they're supposed to be grass-fed. There's no grass around them. They live no natural life. Torture the children, the babies and the kids. Well, we got to do it because it's, you know, it makes better meat. Taking away the baby, you know, we can separate them. Bullshit. Go fuck yourself if you think that, because that is a really discussing worldview outlook, and if you think that's not in some way affecting you, you're out of your mind. You don't understand how things are interconnected, and not only that, but I mean, like he said, you know, as he was saying in the article, there is also, like, you know, more leaning towards selfish purposes that you also are not understanding, how you are really affecting your own body. I mean, some of these things in chicken, I mean, I've watched chickens eat each other alive. I mean, when I was living in Nebraska, I saw some chickens who would start expressing cannibalistic behaviors and eating each other. And I mean, that was one of the reasons I went towards vegetarianism, just watching them eat each other like that. And I remember my manager, he looked at me at the place I was working at. I was working at a farm supply place, and he said, "You know how many chickens you've eaten like that?" As I'm watching one of them, you know, a bunch of chickens eating each other, one of them alive, and we pulled it apart and kept it alive. And he told me, "You know how many chickens you've eaten that are like that?" And I'm thinking, hundreds, easy. I mean, just look at some of these conditions. And honestly, I take this a step further. I say veganism is even the better answer because, you know, I mean that's what we need to really set forward. You know, I mean the slavery of these animals. You know, I'll probably continue some more about this in other shows or episodes, whatever the fuck, videos. And but that's just it for now, and I wanted to get that last part out. So thank you.